All right, let's dive into a part of the Bible that, let's be honest, a lot of us just kind of skim through. Leviticus, chapter 1. It's full of all these super detailed instructions about sacrifices, and it can feel, well, ancient and maybe not so relevant. But what if I told you it's actually a powerful blueprint for understanding what real dedication and community look like? Let's decode this thing.
So, this is the big question, right? It just seems so strange to us today. Why would you take a perfectly good, valuable animal and just burn it? It feels wasteful, maybe even a little barbaric. But to get the answer, we have to totally shift our perspective. We need to stop focusing on what's being destroyed and start asking what's being communicated.
And here it is. This one Hebrew word completely reframes the entire ritual. The term for the burnt offering is olah, and it literally means to ascend, or that which goes up. You see, it was never about destruction. It was about sending a message up. That smoke rising from the altar was a visible prayer, a tangible symbol of commitment, ascending straight to God.
Okay, so to really get the why behind the Ola, we first have to break down the what and the how. The ritual itself was incredibly precise, and believe me, every single step was just packed with meaning. It really boils down to three key actions. First, the offering. It had to be given voluntarily, and the animal had to be unblemished. We're talking the best of the best, no cutting corners. Second, the identification. The worshiper would literally lay their hands on the animal's head. This was a powerful act of saying, this animal represents me. Its fate is tied to mine. And finally, the ascending part. The entire animal was consumed by the fire, a symbol of total dedication. Nothing held back. And you see this phrase pop up 3 times in this one chapter. Now, this isn't about God literally enjoying the smell of barbecue. You gotta love the poetry here. The pleasing aroma is a metaphor. It's about God's satisfaction with a person's heart, a heart of total obedience and complete devotion. It's a beautiful picture of a relationship that's been restored and is in harmony. All right, let's zoom out for a second. This whole ritual wasn't just some private religious thing. No way. This was a nation-building exercise. You can't understand the burnt offering without understanding the people and the wild circumstances they were in. I mean, just think about their backstory. They've just spent 430 years as slaves in Egypt. Their own traditions for worship are probably pretty fuzzy by now. Suddenly, they're free, a whole new nation of former slaves trying to figure out who they are. So the laws they get at Sinai, like in Leviticus, are basically a re-education in how to live and worship together, and it all revolves around this mobile command center, the tabernacle. And this is a huge deal. You couldn't just build an altar in your backyard and do your own thing. Nope. All these sacrifices had to happen at one central place, the tent of meeting. I mean, this was brilliant social engineering. It stopped people from forming little splinter groups with their own private gods and constantly pulled the whole nation together around one shared purpose, one shared identity. And check this out, because this shows just how inclusive the whole system was meant to be. It wasn't just a club for the rich. If you were wealthy and could bring a bull, great. If you were more middle class, a sheep or a goat was perfectly fine. And if you were poor, you could bring a bird, something you could literally find in the wilderness. The point wasn't the price tag. The point was that everyone, no matter their social status, had a way to come before God. Now, like any really profound ancient text, people have looked at this chapter through a lot of different lenses over the centuries. So let's just touch on a few of the big ways it's been understood. So, from an evangelical perspective, the Olah is often seen as a foreshadowing, like a type or a preview of Jesus' perfect and total sacrifice. Then you have historical critical scholars. They tend to zoom in on the social function of the text. You know, how it helps set up the authority of the priests and create social order for this new nation. And in Catholic theology, it's seen as a kind of liturgical shadow of the Mass, the Eucharist, where the faithful offer themselves to God right alongside Christ's sacrifice. And that, of course, brings us right to the New Testament. The first Christians didn't just toss these old texts aside. They reread them, but now through the lens of Jesus. And they started seeing these incredible connections popping up everywhere. The New Testament writers just grabbed that unblemished requirement and run with it. Remember, in Leviticus, the animal had to be physically perfect. Well, the Apostle Peter comes along and describes Jesus as the unblemished Lamb of God, taking that language of physical perfection and applying it to his moral and spiritual perfection. The animal was the shadow. Christ was the reality it was pointing to all along. But here's the key difference they really hammered home: repetition versus finality. The olah, the burnt offering, had to be done again and again and again. But the book of Hebrews argues that Christ's sacrifice was totally different. It was a single, definitive, once-for-all event that finally and fully achieved what all those animal sacrifices could only ever symbolize.
Okay, so the altars are gone. We're not offering bulls or birds today. So what's the point? What does this mean for us right now? Well, there are these timeless principles baked into the ritual that are just as powerful today.
First, there's the principle of excellence. That demand for an unblemished animal, it forces us to ask ourselves, are we giving God our leftovers or are we giving our very best? This isn't just about church stuff. It's about our work, our art, our relationships. The idea is that whatever you do, do it with excellence, as if it's your offering. Second, the principle of total commitment. The fact that the entire animal went up in smoke is such a powerful picture of a life that's fully surrendered, holding nothing back. It really challenges us to look at our own lives and ask, are there any reserved areas? Parts of our money or our time or ambitions that we're keeping walled off from God? And the list goes on. The daily rhythm of the offerings, that can inspire us to have more consistency in our own spiritual lives. The fact that only certain priests could do it back then, well, that points forward to the New Testament idea of a priesthood of all believers, where we all have direct access. And sacrificing a valuable animal when you're living in a desert, that teaches a massive lesson about trusting that God will provide. So yeah, the ancient altars are gone. The smoke doesn't rise from a tabernacle in the desert anymore. But the core principle, the idea of an offering, it hasn't disappeared at all. It's just shifted. The sacrifice has moved from an animal on an altar to a life on display. The Apostle Paul talks about this very thing in Romans 12 when he tells people to offer their bodies as a living sacrifice. So this ancient, and let's face it, kind of weird text leaves us with a very modern and personal question. If olah means that which ascends, and your life is now the offering, what's your ascending message? What is the way you live, your character, your work, your commitments? What does it all say as it rises? That's the challenge and the enduring power of Leviticus 1.